A witch. How convenient. We know the stories, Salem witch trials and King James I and his hunt across Europe in the 1500s. Multitudes of women and men tortured and killed under the guise and heading of witchcraft. For years I believed the story too, as it was told, but as with everything these days, I began to give it a rethink, having picked up more information along the way. My first inkling, other than the systematic system of lies woven into our taught and learned history, was a small fact about alcohol. I'm interested in social history and how we got to these systems, procedures and regulations we see today, so randomly looked this up. I wanted to know when we started licensing alcohol and regulating it, and learnt that women headed the trade originally, then came upon this article last year which renewed my interest in the subject, called "Women Used to Dominate the Beer Industry," showing how women dominated the trade, wore black pointy hats and had big cauldrons to brew the beer. Sounds like an easy leap, doesn't it? Especially when you realise after the witch clearances, it appeared it was an industry and land grab, as with many other incidents throughout history. People got rid of their competition or problems by shouting witch, even on their own family sometimes. Stupidly simple, swift and effective. They say that men took over after that and women lost their place within that particular industry and possibly others. I will have to delve further. But it made me wonder, as I have done previously, about what other gifts and skills may have been targeted by jealous or fearful people. I've long thought that natural healers and seers used to exist, and possibly still do today, and that many would have been seen as a threat. It's also not helpful to some if people can read you or know what you intend if you are of a devious nature. That's why intuition these days is encouraged but used against you as soon as you display it or people catch on you have it. They want you to reveal it so they can make you mistrust it. They wouldn't want people knowing what they could really do and are actually capable of. To be able to remove your business or personal rival must have been an advantage for many. As we see today, once you have something in place to deal with those labelled, many terrible things can happen. I believe that's why they killed some. People with powers were a threat to them, and the rest? People who knew just too much? Well, I think asylums probably helped a bit there. You could just lock someone away forever if they wanted them out of the way. They were also used to get rid of people who were just a mere inconvenience to some, in the way, or selfishness, or inheritance. Don't misunderstand me though, these are not just tools of the past, they continue to this day, just with different names, labels, methods, and gains. Many people didn't fall for the ruse though, and were unwittingly then caught up in it themselves, because those who perpetrate the atrocities will do all they can to keep them either hidden or make them acceptable. And there will always be people who are thrown to the wolves, as they say. Nuremberg being an example of that, and quite possibly we will see another one of those types of trials in the very near future over the latest scandal upon the masses. However, as with everything we are given a heads up for, only time will tell. Words and meaning. It seems words are being used in a very strange game at the moment, and to be honest, have always been used in some way to control, dictate, and define society and the way we are educated to understand basic things. Now they are being weaponised in a new way though, or at least new to us in this time. Already covered a bit in my article, What's in a Name? From the point of view of what you are called for your given name, and how some people use that as a basis to feel victimised. However, on top of that debacle, there is a separate yet related one making itself known too. Terms being introduced to redefine the words of womanhood and female-related issues. You may have heard some of them. Chest feeder instead of breastfeeding. Birth giver instead of mother. And now the absolute zinger of bonus hole instead of using anatomical terms. So vagina is out, bonus hole is in. Women are starting to sound like variety of rides at the fairground. Start with the birth giver name, moving on to the chest feeder section, finally winning the bonus hole round. And maybe it is a game to the ones who seek to infiltrate and redefine things for others of the female persuasion. I read an article the other day about menopause, as I was interested to see how they would word it, and as I suspected, not one mention of the word woman. I am also quite bemused by the strange term being attributed to those who do not partake in the same-sex lifestyle. that it seems necessary for everyone to be renamed and labelled, so there is no normal. Personally, it makes me chuckle every time I see cis, partly because it is a label that someone else has decided to allocate to people, and partly because in my world it means construction industry scheme, so is a tax status, not a sexual orientation. But hey, who am I to tell people what words they can and can't use, and what they mean or don't mean? Honestly, I love words and their meanings, how those meanings came to be defined and redefined for purpose and general use. And that is it really, the purpose. Look at what words have achieved so far. Just in the last few years, so many have been twisted and commandeered, and those that can't be, it seems some of those are up for being removed altogether if they get in the way of social advancement. Because words can cause feelings, and feelings can be used against people. So you go back a step and work out what words will be most hurtful, meaningful, and useful. As we know, within racism there are certain words that have been clearly weaponised and used for the purpose of negativity and making people feel bad, belittled, and inferior. That's literally what they are designed for, on all sides, towards different colours, genders, ideas, looks, religion, etc. All of these differences are just variances of the same thing, yet people fight over them, to the death in some cases, usually started or spurred on with words. Categories and labels help to divide people, and vanity and ego play their part to allow people to want to be separated out. But it is an odd thing to see segregation making a comeback. I genuinely thought people wouldn't want to be racially separated again, having hated it and fought it when it was against a certain group. But I now see white people being excluded from a comedy club, which wanted a black-only audience, a black-only graduation, businesses that want to serve only black customers. Which kind of threw me, I guess, thinking everyone wanted to be accepted in the same society and as equals. People really are people though, whatever their location, upbringing, heritage, and ideals. They are all susceptible of falling into the same trap. Selectivism perhaps, or just hypocritical maybe. Becoming that which you claim to hate the most must be an odd way to live. And equally odd, trying to be that which you clearly hate. I guess it's the recent BLM hoo-ha that made me do a double take on it all. Hearing some incredibly racist things which are now deemed acceptable because it was the oppressed group saying it. Shocking. Or not if you understand people are people, and some of them are very hateful in nature. It doesn't matter what colour people are, it's what they say and do that shocks or interests me, not what their exterior skin sack looks like. Crafty. Words and their meaning seem rather important in our lives, language being a pivotal form of communication, spoken and written, so easy to understand why so important. And currently we have a murky pool emerging of the redefining of terms and long decided meanings, which serves a purpose, because if people can't effectively communicate, then other things become more difficult and can be ultimately frustrating to people, and helps a lack of cohesion. Even between people who speak the same language, may often find they don't understand each other. A famous quote springs to mind here. "I know you think you understand what you thought I said, but I'm not sure you realise that what you heard is not what I meant." Alan Greenspan. That saying could be used for so much these days, but will be necessary for the new hate speech laws they want to enact whenever someone sees fit to do so. And on that basis, I guess it's an interesting time to focus on those who believe that hateful speech is in fact being used. So, my question would be, I guess, is it because the person has had a perception of being hated which makes it so? Or what was said with hateful intent or content? And of course, with either opinion, one must then surely ask, who gets to decide what is considered a hateful feeling? When does a fact become hate? Or an opinion with no feeling whatsoever gets decided by someone who is not feeling what that person is? That's why it's such a murky area being encouraged, because it will be based on how people feel about things that have been said. stopping people being able to toughen up and be able to handle basic things and interactions in life. Instead, keeping them in their feelings and focusing on words, rather than using your thoughts and focusing on what people do. And you really do need both to be functioning to get through life effectively. Being able to understand things and have feeling towards them is great, but know when to apply thought and logic and perhaps a little outside perspective. Don't go to bed angry. Don't make big decisions when you're really excited or down. Don't react in the heat of the moment. All sayings to let you know that sometimes feelings take over and logic goes out the window for a bit. But with time and a bit of reason, things look and feel different. If you never learnt to process those things, or have something blocking normal responses like painkillers or other prescription drugs, then it may be extra tricky to manage your emotional responses. And if you happen to be in a position of power or authority, then it can easily be the motivator in what is a disproportionate reaction to merely words, which are not even deemed offensive in the normal walks of life. And you know what they say about that. Offence is taken, not given. So can you really punish someone by law for taking words as hatred, when in most cases you cannot prove that they were given as such? But I believe that's the point. People then get distracted by words and their intended meaning and consequences of that perceived intention, rather than paying attention to what is being said, not how you felt when they said it. Because clearly their feelings are not quite as stable as some people may think, with Karens now being a thing. Developing thick skin, as they called it, was something I thought most people knew about. And while it shouldn't make you seem impervious, it's necessary to not spend your life being hurt or disappointed. And another of those sayings that seems really apt these days, more than ever: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Simple, yet says what it means. And although I knew what it meant at the time as a kid when I heard it, I have understood more so when older why it's important, and what happens when it is lacking in some. But back to words, and other importance of written and spoken language, namely the use of words to cast spells, what they associate with witchcraft these days, to give you a medieval view of the term, and of witches and warlocks, hypnotising people with their spells. Makes me think of the modern usages of them, casting being used for a magical process of creating illusions for entertainment, with actors and specially written dialogue to capture your thoughts. Sounds quite like a spell to me, and on that basis we do indeed have witches, wizards and warlocks around today. The word craft can itself mean a skill to deceive others, rather than just for a hobby or such, which leads me to think of another word to have it attached of late: Minecraft, which may indeed just be a simple game to be enjoyed, but I have suspicions. Yet the term being crafty is there, for deviousness and deception, with spells being cast and thoughts being harnessed in a certain way, almost as if the outburst of feelings from them is being harvested to drive on the ever-growing vibration it creates. And if you would like an idea of just how far it is said that thought creates reality, you might like to read my piece, Is It Really the Machines We Should Fear? Specifically the part about tulpamuncy. Many have noticed, however, that words have been weaponised in a way not seen before. Propaganda and its uses now reaching into every aspect of people's lives. Not to bring clarity or to further our ability to discover and communicate. No, it seems to be there to confuse and divide us, while being manipulated into dastardly schemes and regimes. And they really would like people to be too stupid to notice or understand. So if they are too busy arguing amongst themselves, or don't have the right language or understanding to say anything, it means they are less likely to ever stand together. Or so they think. Twisted for purpose. It seems we are in a very strange social landscape, where things are being redefined for purpose, and twisted to fit the prevailing agenda or narrative being pushed, or in some cases, enforced. And it would appear that was always the case, demonising those who do not play ball or go along with it, conveniently being able to label people with whatever you have decided is the next thing to discredit, belittle, control, or in some instances, destroy people. When thoughts are being brought into the arena as punishable, it's a very dangerous and slippery slope to be going down. It used to be actions that got you in trouble, or wanting to action thoughts and planning to do so. That seemed quite clear-cut and easy to understand. But the era of the thought police, as mentioned in the book 1984, and frequently referenced on social media these days, seems to be coming about. People being deemed a danger because of thoughts, and needing to be sent on re-education programs. Sounds crazy, but that's where we're at. And it does seem that any idea of thought, society, or ideas can be targeted and can suddenly become unauthorised. Even more worrying is they can be deemed so without any understanding of them. Being able to control what and how people think has been a long-running project that will have changed and adapted for the times. Indoctrinating and conditioning generations for purpose, a repeated teaching and expectation through traditions, rituals and ceremonies, history and institutions there to amplify and centralise that. So on top of wrong think, we have real life consequences for it would seem. Arrests for silent praying, and a Canadian psychologist being told he will be sent for re-education for his public opinions are two examples we have seen in the media. Although technically, only one counts. And if no one knew that person was silently praying, how would you know? Is it a thing where we are to be conditioned to be afraid of people's thoughts, before they even turn into intentions or actions? Fear of what people think has been a long-running issue with people. I won't deny that and try to make it a new problem. And people's reactions to what they think someone else is thinking can be a problem. But that is where we used to have the line, that unless someone acted upon those thoughts, either the fearful one or who they were worried about, then nothing would happen. It's well known that people can't mind read as a general skill, and often misread social cues, emotions, facial expressions, and even plain old words can be misunderstood. There are some extra serious and dark implications to all this as well, along the lines of a witch, how convenient, and of certain type of people being targeted. What if they decide a miscarriage is actually the woman's fault, or that they caused it through bad thoughts, or of wanting it to happen? And it might sound far-fetched, but that is where it seems to be headed, where someone gets a headache and blames a curse or a person they don't like, or are paranoid about, for sending them bad vibes. As does happen in certain cultures and traditions in modern times, of witch doctors and spells. People used to laugh at other cultures being so primitive with that type of thinking, yet employ the same thought process when it comes to fearing someone from afar, when there is no physical danger or threat of it even present. Thinking they can infect your thought or life by just existing, not even being anywhere near you, yet there is a fear, and one that seems to be growing. Ouija or no? Not sure if they still do the rounds or pop up in people's childhoods, and to be honest, I can't quite remember how it came up in mine. I'm assuming a movie, as it was the 80s and there was plenty of dark themes going on. But when it did come up as a topic, I was told very sternly that I was not to go anywhere near one, and it was a serious matter. That confused me somewhat, as we weren't a religious household in any way. But as soon as you know there is an extra mysterious element added, well, of course that would pique the interest of someone like me. Once you start looking into things, I guess you would call of an occult nature, you start to see there are a few things that get lumped together. Seances, tarot reading, Ouija boards, and other things that often get put down as witchcraft, or are thought of to be in a more Victorian charlatan time. And for many years I have been, and still do remain a sceptic on many of those things as they are presented. But as with much, I review my previous reasonings and see if there could be an element of truth to something, or that we have misunderstood its meaning or purpose. And I wonder if the things that we are told to think are normal, and not to give it further thought because that would be silly. Well, I have never been one to shy away from what may seem like a ridiculous idea or concept to some, as you should well know by now if you have read my previous articles. But the main subject point for this is the concept of a Ouija board, and that it is said to be a communication device to connect you with spirits and the dead. In recent years, I wondered if it was indeed a communicator, but maybe not to the dead or ghosts, as on that subject I am also sceptical. But still, a cross-dimensional portal of sorts. And although contact with something that seems familiar may make people presume it to be the passed-over soul of their loved ones, it could also be that things there have existed in this dimension for a time, so are still part of it in some way. When they call it the other side, maybe it is, but just not in a life after death kind of way some believe. And of that suspected portal through letters and numbers, is it just confined to what we would expect a Ouija board layout to be? Or could it be a computer keyboard, and just pen and paper, or anything you can use to imprint words, numbers and symbols? And really, when you think of the board as a communication device, you must remember that it seems to only be a way for the other side to relay a message. But it seems they are listening and watching already. And that method just taps into it for them to be able to answer directly, where we might think of questions and the centrepiece moving out to spell the reply. I wondered about the words aspect too. My line of thought went as follows. A curse. A solemn utterance intended to invoke a supernatural power to inflict harm or punishment on someone or something. Cursive. A type of handwriting. Cursor. A movable indicator on a computer screen identifying the point that will be affected by input from the user. An obvious path, but not necessarily correct, but seems of note. That a spoken curse, if a real thing, can then be manifested using written words instead. And perhaps words had more power than we knew. It might be a reason to want everyone writing and using cursors and being taught cursive. Or not. And it really is just a normal form of communication that only is similar in word. Casting a spell. Another where words cross over in usage, also mentioned in crafty and words and meaning. And one where manifesting something using words is important, as well as perhaps extra symbolism and items to enhance the atmosphere for the imagination, to help with the energy needed for it. Casting in the industry of entertainment, TV, movies, theatre and so on. Choosing the candidate that will facilitate the channeling of words. In most of those, to create an obvious illusion you know about. But in all the other areas where they specifically pick someone to be the voice or the face of something in the real world, it would appear they are also creating an illusion. Where writing, drawing, words and symbols appear to have more meaning than we think, but also statues, icons, relics, and creating a live version of things may also be a potent way to manifest things from that other side. If, of course, such things are possible. And with a rather dark theme running through society at the moment, it seems as if it just might be.